We got a true crime case. It goes all the way back to, I believe it's Austin, Texas, back in the 90s. I love 90s true crime cases because that's when I was growing up, and it was when I first learned to feel fear, about possibly being true crime. Was when I would watch Unsolved Mysteries, and I would wonder where like certain of my friends had gone after that white van came through town. The 90s were just a wonderfully scary time. It was a good time for crime. And we're getting a lot solved now with genealogy and other things like that. But this is one of those terrible few cases that has not been solved yet. So spoiler alert, you're not going to get the kind of closure that you want on this show. You're going to be left with questions. You're going to be left angry and frustrated. So to begin the delightful process of anger and frustration, Kendra, why don't you tell us about the case of the 4 girls who were killed in the yogurt shop in Austin all those years ago?
Yeah, so like you said, our case takes place in Austin, Texas in 1991 at a yogurt shop called I Can't Believe It's Yogurt, if I can spit it out.
It's a difficult time to podcast, folks, because everybody's sick. Kendra is still she's still dying. I am also a little bit under the weather. I apologize if you hear sniffles. We're doing the best we can. The show is free to you. Ghost bed.
I think I Can't Believe It's Yogurt is a chain, and I want to say that I've been to it before. I that just kind of occurred to me when I said it out loud.
What's interesting to me is when I was reviewing the case by listening to various other podcasts, searching for their bad takes, I heard it called I Can't Believe This Is Yogurt. I Can't Believe It's Not Yogurt. I also heard it referred to as Can't Be Yogurt, which is a possible meaning of the acronym TCBY. I know that you're too young to remember this, but there was a time when TCBY was the absolute shit. Only Baskin Robbins was out there putting a stop to the massive takeover plans of TCBY. They were everywhere. There was a point where TCBY was merged with Subway, where you could go get a cold cut combo and a delicious frozen yogurt meal. And so TCBY at one point was ubiquitous. I don't know if this was a original chain. This I Can't Believe This Is Yogurt. It seems like that's trademark infringement with the butter spread and also with TCBY. I don't know. So that's the name of the restaurant is what I'm going to.
Yeah, and you said that, and that's what I was thinking of was TCBY. We had it down here too when I was a kid, and it was amazing. So forget what I just said.
I was in college, so you keep on going.
So this non-chain yogurt shop in Austin, Texas, Eliza Thomas and Jennifer Harbison are 2 teenage girls who are friends, and they work at this yogurt shop together. They're working at night to close up. So it's just the 2 of them. Around 8 o'clock, they're both there.
Both minors, by the way. There's not an adult manager there, which is strange.
Right. Yeah, I mean, it is 91, so I'm sure that was totally normal back then. But
it's funny talking about the past, if I may further interrupt you and delay the story. The podcast I heard referred to Austin as a small town. They referred to it as a quiet community. I think they had to do this because if you're listening to a podcast that's about a major city filled with crime, you do not feel anything for the victims later. And every podcast has got to be like, well, they always lit up a room and they were such a family person. And there's this weird drive amongst podcasts to say that, this shocked the town. This never has happened here before. This is the kind of place where you leave your door unlocked. Like if you wanted to do a drinking game for a podcast, these would literally be on there. And for some reason, I'm hearing Austin, a major city in Texas, even 30 years ago, is being referred to as a small town with almost no crime. There's one homicide detective on duty tonight. He's expecting a quiet night. And then later, I'm hearing that in this neighborhood where this TCBY was, that all the houses and all the businesses are all barred up because it's just drug city. And so I'm like, why did you bother to paint this story in the backdrop of a provincial town where no crime has ever occurred? And then later you're going to say, like, these girls had no business working at this restaurant because the place had been robbed like 100 times. Make up your mind. Some podcasts need to be edited, and they need to be edited by me.
I did listen to one podcast on this, and it was 3 parts, and each episode was an hour long. And this did not need to be that long. And for a very long stretch of the first episode, the host was talking about how everyone described Austin as like the small town feel. And Californians came and ruined it. So, I mean,
they did, but I don't think
huge.
Austin. I don't think Austin was met any definition of a small town, even back then. Maybe it's just because I have a different or better standard of what a small town is because I live in a town of 700 people where trick-or-treaters ask me who the hell I am. Like, that's a different standard of what a small town is. But don't try to paint Austin as a small town where nothing happens because people were getting their asses murdered in Austin every night back in the 90s. Kendra, please tell us the story at last. Folks, we'll get you out of here by 8:30, I promise.
So Eliza and Jennifer are working this closing shift at this yogurt shop. At 9 o'clock, Jennifer's younger sister, Sarah, and Sarah's friend, Amy Ayers, join them because these two, they're younger. Sarah's 15, Amy is 13. They went to a nearby mall. It closed at 9 o'clock, and Jennifer was told Sarah, like, just come to the yogurt shop and I'll drive you home whenever we're done, right? So all 4 girls are at the shop. The shop closes at 11. Around midnight, a patrolman is doing like a business check, right? This is when businesses are closed and you drive around them to make sure no one's hanging out or breaking in or whatever. And he goes to the strip mall where this yogurt shop's at, and he notices that the yogurt shop is on fire. Like,
oh shit.
Smoke is billowing out of this shop. Naturally,
this is a place where people go for frosty treats, not for fire. I won't abide this.
Precisely. So he calls, he notifies dispatch. The fire department comes out. Fire department goes in, and it's so smoky, they're having to, crawl around to locate the fire. And they go through the front of the shop. They realize that there's no flames. They move to the back of the shop, and this is when they come across what one of the firefighters believes to be a human foot.
Shit.
They extinguish the fire, and they discover the charred bodies of 4 individuals in this back room. So the investigation is, underway, and they identify them as the 4 girls that were in the shop: Eliza, Jennifer, Sarah, and Amy. So obviously, this is a complicated case because there's an arson aspect to this. And the actual crime, like you said, is unsolved. So I kind of want to talk about the way that this was investigated, kind of a little bit more than the actual crime, since we don't really even know who committed these crimes. The crime scene, obviously, everything is completely burnt. But they were able to...
Or flooded out with water, yeah.
Correct, yeah. But they were able to ascertain that this was likely a robbery because the front of the shop looked like the girls were still in the middle of closing up, right? Like, the top of the ice cream machines were open. There was cleaning rags on the counter, like they were in the middle of, doing the regular stuff. Chairs
have been stacked, preparing the dining room for mopping. Yeah.
Correct. There was a key in the front door, but the back door was open. 3 of the 4 girls, Sarah, Eliza, and Jennifer, were found stacked on top of each other. And Amy was found a little bit away from the girls, lying on the floor.
When I heard the initial description of this, I was actually very much weirded out initially because they described them as being posed. However, I think posed would not be an accurate way to describe them. I believe that when they were investigating the source of the fire, I believe the attempt was by the suspect or suspects was to destroy the bodies for evidence first. I think they had the misunderstanding that if you locate all the bodies in one place and set a fire, that you're going to for sure destroy the bodies. However, bodies don't burn the way that you think that they would because they're mostly water. And by stacking them all together and starting a fire there, you're actually your bodies aren't fuel, right? Because they're so wet. They're something that's going to delay the progress of a fire. So by having 3 bodies stacked there, I think they were actually doing a better job at preserving the bodies. Now, of course, we weren't able to get a whole lot of forensic evidence from the bodies because the fire still was intense, but I believe that shows that whoever did this was attempting to hide evidence, but they didn't really know what they were doing because that wouldn't be the best way to go about it.
Right. And that's something that happens occasionally in these cases where people think they're just going to burn a body and it's going to just like cremate itself. But cremation is at like 1,000 degrees or something like that, because you have to incinerate the body, which you can't do with a flame fire like that. You can't set a body on fire and
the top's going to get burned. You're going to get a lot of superficial damage, which I'm guessing if they left behind DNA, that still helps. If you're trying to, obfuscate the identity, it would have to be very hot to burn the teeth and various things of bones that would help you determine a victim's height. The length of a femur would be something you could use to determine their overall height. The pelvic girdle would determine the sex of the body. You have to get it very, very hot to really get all that stuff away. And like I said, this is not fuel. You're not stacking bodies like it's cordwood. They're actually going to hinder the progress of a fire because it's dense and it's wet, so it's not going to spread a fire. But I guess
you're insulating whatever's in it.
You're insulating it, but yeah, I mean, by stacking. So I hate to be sort of inhuman about it because we're talking about underage girls. We're talking about human beings, but like the one at the bottom and the one in the middle they're going to be protected by the bodies that are laying on top, right? They're not. It's not going to increase the heat or anything of the fire by stacking them together. If anything, by removing channels for air to get in there, you're going to make it a less effective fire. So whoever's doing this, it seems like, 4 girls killed, posed. It seems like, this would be another in a series or something like that. But what I get from it is that it's not very well planned or very well thought out.
Right. The rest of the scene, when they're trying to collect evidence and items and things like that, as you mentioned earlier, everything is pretty much burnt, or evidence could have, we don't know because we don't have it, was washed away by the firefighters, which not their fault. They're there to put the fire out, which is what they did. But it does hinder an investigation like this because, your DNA is pretty much gone at that point, fingerprints, things like that.
There's not going to be any surveillance footage in a TCB wire from the 90s either. Right, exactly.
So there wasn't a whole lot of evidence taken. There was a partial DNA strand that was taken from one of the girls because unfortunately, I believe one was confirmed to be sexually assaulted, unfortunately, and one of them was suspected to be, but they were able to get DNA from I believe it was Sarah. I'm not sure. But all of the girls were shot. 2 of them had ligature marks on their neck, like they were strangled. Jennifer, Sarah, and Eliza were shot in the head once with a .22 caliber firearm. They were bound, gagged, and these were the 3 girls that were stacked on top of each other. Amy, who, like I said earlier, was found a little bit of ways from these girls, and she was also shot in the head, but she was shot twice with 2 different caliber weapons. So they believe that she was shot once with a .22. It didn't penetrate her skull, and she kind of like crawled away. But unfortunately, the attacker caught up with her and shot her again with I saw a .38 and a .380 in 2 different sources. But either way, it was a second gun. So obviously,
she was also pistol whipped. And another important detail that's very sad is that the girls were bound and gagged with their own clothes, so they were stripped naked. Yes. And that's a sign of a sexual assault or a deviant personality, or someone who's like many of the big cases that we've covered here, but also they felt the need to tie them up, like, but it wasn't well planned. Like they didn't show up with rope or anything, or any kind of commonplace bindings. They were having to resort to what was available.
Right. And through context clues and the scene and the amount of victims and the firearms and all that, obviously they believe there was more than one assailant, more than one suspect. But like you said, there's really not a lot to go on. There's no cameras. There's a couple of eyewitness accounts that describe two hooded men, or suspicious fellows, that were seated at a table close to the cash register. And earlier we said that the chairs were put up on the tables, except for that table. The chairs were still down, like people were seated there at some point.
Like the two guys that were seen were still there at closing time, possibly waiting for the restaurant to empty out so that they could attack the girls. And I believe that money was taken from the till, which you have to wonder how much money, even in a cash society like the 90s, where how much money is going to be in the till of a TCBY that's being run by two 17-year-old girls. There's not going to be enough money there to make this robbery worth murder. Right.
Yeah, in a case like this, I believe about $550 was taken, give or take a couple dollars. But if it was two men with four teenage girls, and we're just going to assume through speculation and context clues that it was most likely these two men, because they were seen there by more than one person.
One of them was law enforcement. Yeah.
Yes. And there were probably 4 or 5 people, regular customers, that came in between like 8 and 11 when the shop closed. But if they wanted to rob the place, they easily could have done that and left, right? The homicides 4, it feels very sadistic, like they had an opportunity and they took it because they were just there and they could. And that makes this really a lot more sinister, in my opinion, because you could have just taken the money and left if that's what you wanted, but you didn't. You stayed and terrorized these 4 minor girls and killed them. So
yeah,
it's very disturbing. But this is all that detectives have to go on, is this eyewitness account. And some of the podcasts, they disparage the crime scene investigator a lot, because apparently she mismanaged evidence. She didn't collect enough evidence, in their opinion. One of them said that she didn't process the entire restaurant for fingerprints, which, hello, it was on fire. You're not going to try to...
Not only that, but you're going to get so many prints that are going to come back to unknown people. You're just going to muddy the waters, I think. I mean, to me, the only advantage that you could have out of that is if you get a usable print somehow post fire, post extinguishing, maybe something from the bathroom or something, you could run that, and then you could find out if someone who's been previously printed is there, someone who's printed for employment, like that ex-police officer, or someone who's already got a felonious record. That might point you to one person if you're lucky. I mean, they are cleaning the restaurant all the time, hopefully. And so what if you find a felon who came in and got some ice cream?
There's no way.
I just feel like you could expect to get so many prints there that I'm not sure that it would help. But also the art of collecting fingerprints, I think, is commonly misunderstood. I think people think that anything you touch, obviously, or every single time, leaves an indelible and usable print that you can use to run through APHIS or whatever, and it's just not like that.
Yeah, it's difficult. Like it has to be on the right surface, and it can't, like some surfaces, your fingerprints are just oils that are transferred onto a surface, and then the ash that's used to dust the print contacts the oil, leaves the pattern. You pick it up with tape, and then you send it off to the lab. But not every surface will pick it up. And I've had people, very angry people, who are their house has been burglarized and I'm taking fingerprints off of surfaces that I know will produce fingerprints, but I'm not taking them off of textured walls where they could have put their hand, because it's not going to come up. And now I just put ash all over their wall. But in this case, I can picture the scene in my head. I don't know how big this shop was, but if it was on fire, there's going to be soot and charred crap everywhere, water everywhere, because the origin of the fire was on top of a metal shelf where like paper products were kept.
Styrofoam.
So the fire, right? So the fire spread in like a V-shaped pattern and kind of came down the walls and on the ceiling and everything like that. So when the firefighters are fighting the fire, they're spraying up, they're spraying the walls. Like it's probably a disaster to collect evidence from this scene, right?
Yeah, I wish someone could take a look at a crime scene photo, because it probably looked like a bomb blew up in there.
Yes, precisely. And there's only so much you can do if the scene has been contaminated, you know? Apparently there were a couple of items that went missing at some point, but they weren't entirely crucial to the actual crime. It's still bad evidence handling, but it is what it is. I mean, it's not an excuse. I'm just saying. So this is where we're at with this investigation. Not a lot to go on. As they're trying to kind of figure out who could have possibly done this, another character comes into this conversation, a detective who had a reputation for, I guess, getting false confessions a lot, or being very intimidating. And obviously this was another point of contention in a lot of the other podcasts that cover this case, because I guess this guy was kind of an asshole, right? Some of the tactics that they're describing that he's using, I was never an investigator, so I'm not even going to try to analyze how he did this. I don't know all the legalities of that type of an interview, especially in a homicide case. But the way that they were talking about him in these podcasts, it was very apparent that they don't understand how law enforcement works or how investigations work. I don't know how far you got when you were researching, or how deeply you looked into this.
I heard people say that that they were angry about the tactics that were being used because one of them's illegal in Europe, as if that mattered at all. I don't know if you know this, but there's not some kind of global court where we're all held to the same standards. The people in Sweden or wherever, they have a judicial system that they think is fair by their standards, and they get to impose that on themselves. That doesn't mean anything here. And I'll tell you this as well. You cannot have it both ways. You get mad that this case isn't solved, and then the same people who are mad about that will also get mad that a quote unquote unethical tactic was used. You know, that a detective or something will claim to a suspect that someone else has already ratted them out when they haven't, or that they have evidence that they don't have, or whatever. And so often people are saying, well, the police lied to me. And it's just like, we have no obligation to tell you the truth. We will do whatever we have to do within the confines of the law, which gives us a much broader scope than simply lying to you or not lying to you. And that's lying to a suspect is very much a way of putting leverage on a person to get them to comply or to confess. Now, if you have nothing to confess, then, as long as you're not lying, you're going to be fine. Now, that takes us into a broader territory where we talk about what's morally and legally unconscionable. One of the podcasts I heard, I don't know if they were talking about it in this case specifically or another case with the same investigator, but a police officer, detective, at one point brandished or pointed his firearm at a suspect in order to coerce a confession. We both know that that's assault. It's illegal. It's a coerced confession. Nothing that comes after that conversation, after that gun is pulled, is going to be usable. Even if they confess to stealing the Lindbergh baby, it's not going to stand up in court, because after that weapon comes out and after there's coercion, it's not going to work. but there are a lot of tactics that people find distasteful that are totally within the realm of the law, and that police should use to find and convict people who murder and kill and burn little girls.
Yeah, the whole they lied to coerce you to confess to something that you didn't do. There is absolutely nothing that prevents law enforcement from lying to you to get like you were saying, to get a confession or figure out if somebody is even involved, or like by process of elimination. Like I said, I was never a homicide detective. I never interviewed high profile suspects like that outside of like initial contact, right? But I think the intricacies and the legalities behind investigating is better left to the actual people who get trained to do it and who are professionals and really understand what they can and can't do in the confines of the law, and they know how to investigate correctly. It seems, I think when you're looking at it from a non-law enforcement perspective, you're probably putting yourself in the suspect's shoes, and you're not probably looking at it from, I would think, maybe they're looking at it from like, my friends are lying to me to get me to say something that I didn't do or don't want to say or don't want to do or whatever. Not, I'm a homicide suspect and I'm being interviewed. Like, it's a serious thing. And if we aren't letting law enforcement use certain tactics because you think it's not right, or you think it's whatever, or you do it different, then you're probably not going to get a lot of solved cases. So
yeah, I was going to say, we have so many rights protecting everyone. And I'm very much a civil rights person, and you have all kinds of rights, and infraction of these rights they're all grounds for appeal, right? Even if you get convicted. But if you want to take away every tool of leverage that police officers have, just goodbye. The rights of the individual are going to completely outweigh the ability for police officers to solve crimes, other than just saying like, hey, we've advised you of all of your rights. With that in mind, do you want to tell us anything? And then they'll say like, I absolutely did it. Short of that, like, you're not going to get anything. So folks, police officers need leverage, and they need tools to investigate and solve crimes. Now, in this case, people are putting themselves in the shoes of these suspects who are these coerced confessions, because as we'll come to find out, some people were convicted and later exonerated, or they're still suspects, but the convictions were overturned or set aside. So we put ourselves in their position, because it's like, well, they were wrongfully in prison, whatever happened to get them there. But who we should really be thinking about and whose side we should take is the victims. Okay, like I just said, I respect civil rights, and I don't want any police officer to violate anyone's civil rights. I want to see those intact every time. With those tools and with those rights, police officers can still, within the confines of the law, go after and develop a case and find evidence to convict people. But the persons that we should be thinking about are always the victims, because their rights have been violated too. Everyone has the right to live. Everyone has a right to go to work when you're 17 and make money so that you can buy your car, you can buy a prom dress or whatever. These girls all had rights that have been irrevocably violated, right? There's no appeals court for these 4 girls who are gone, or for their families who are hurting, or for the lives that they never got to lead out, or the damage to everyone who surrounds them, the community, the police officers who had to see the bodies, the firefighters. There's a huge number of people who have had their rights violated, and we need to also keep in mind that police officers most of the time are operating in good faith to pursue justice for those victims. So let's not get too lost in the weeds about some kids who were in possession of firearms when they shouldn't have been, or whatever. We have laws, and we have rights for them, and they'll be respected, and when violated, it'll be rectified. So the system is in place for that. Let's keep going with the case, since now I'm off my soapbox again.
It's a great soapbox, because it's important to remember, like I said, one of the podcasts that I watched was in total 3 hours for this case, which is way excessive. And that person can do their channel however they want. I'm not saying that. I just mean people do tend to get lost in the weeds with things like this, because they want to nitpick and make everything law enforcement's fault. because I think they're trying to find a reason why, because this is horrible.
They need a scapegoat. Instead of blaming the suspects who have yet to be identified, instead of seating our righteous indignation and anger on those people, finding them and bringing them to justice, we just get frustrated and we just take the easiest route. Well, who can we blame? Who could satisfy our anger now? Well, the police, because it was their job and it didn't happen. So I think that people are carrying around a lot of anger and frustration, which is fine. But let's make sure we're pointing it the right direction. Every police officer wants to solve a case. There's no homicide detective that wants to be like, well, I failed on this one, or I screwed this up, or you don't get to be a homicide detective. You don't get to reach that level by being someone who's unconscientious about doing their job, or someone that doesn't want to figure it out, or someone that's not passionate about the law or whatever. Once people are in that position, they generally do care. Yeah, there's cases of burnout or whatever, but whoever was assigned to this case and saw 4 dead girls, at least one of which was sexually assaulted, I guarantee you they did not have a laissez-faire, however it turns out, or let's see how it works out kind of attitude about it. They wanted to solve the case.
Yeah, and the youngest one was 13, which is it's always, obviously 17 and 15 are way too young to be taken out of the world like this. But I just think, 13 is so young. I don't know. It just, for whatever reason, it shouldn't matter because, like you said, these were human beings and they had rights to live. But it just hits different when it's somebody that young, especially dying in a way such as this, very violent and horrible,
I understand the frustration, but let's save it for the assholes that did this. Correct.
And like we've said and reiterated, law enforcement had pretty much nothing to go on at this point. And when they were doing their investigations, it had been a couple of years. The suspects they were kind of thinking did it were 20 at this point, and this happened when they were, I think, 16 and 17. So it's been unsolved for a few years at this point, right? They gather these men, and they bring them in for questioning. Their names were Robert Springsteen, Michael Scott, Maurice Pierce, and Forrest Wellborn. You mentioned earlier that these are the 4 suspects where one of them, during questioning, kind of confessed to it, said because they were in possession of firearms at the time, and it was believed that he was confessing and implicating his friends to somehow get around the firearm charge, which doesn't make a lot of sense to me, but I think this is why people nitpick because of the way that it ended up. This is why people nitpick the investigation tactics of Hector Polanco, which is that investigator I was telling you about earlier. And they, some of the people that are analyzing this, they go into the false confession stuff, like the psychology behind a false confession, the different types of false confessions. And apparently this individual was interrogated for several hours. There was like a good cop, bad cop type thing. But inevitably the confessions of Robert Springsteen and Michael Scott wound them up in trial for the murders.
Which, before you blame the cops on that means the state's attorney has taken the evidence in front of a grand jury, and a jury of their peers has indicted them, saying that the prosecutor has enough evidence to proceed to trial. So you have all these checks and balances. You want to say that, well, the police, did the wrong thing. Well, we also have a state's attorney who believes that this is a good case. And as you've mentioned before, a state's attorney is not necessarily going to take a case to trial that they don't think that they can win, because of course their win-loss percentage is just like a sport or anything else. They don't want a bunch of losses on their record. They're going to take good cases, and those that they don't think they can win, they're going to try to use to leverage into a plea. And if they don't have enough evidence for leverage, that's also a sign that they shouldn't be taking a case to court. So
correct, especially not a quadruple homicide.
Yes, you say the police messed up. You say the police coerced us because the police wanted to be seen as solving the case. Well, your state's attorney is doing the same thing, and you also have whoever was on that jury that granted those indictments saying you have enough to at least proceed to trial. And if they were convicted, you can also blame the jury that sat the case and heard the evidence and convicted them. So often, again, I'm on my soapbox, but it's like people want to blame the police for this wrongful conviction. A lot of people who are put into place by our system so that to ensure fairness all failed and convicted these people wrongfully.
Yeah, and I think at this point when I was researching the case, I was like, okay, what about that DNA that was collected? Why are we not at least? I mean, it's 91. Well, by the time this is rolled around, it's probably like 95, right? It's still not great time for DNA, but they had a partial strain and they were able to run it. And there was apparently some sort of match. Initially, when they ran it,
yeah.
Yes, initially, it didn't come up to anything because I don't remember what their DNA system were that they ran it through the first time, or if it was just their own lab trying to analyze it. They didn't have anything in their arsenal. So when they ran it through CODIS, there was a profile match, but not till 2009. We'll get to that. That's kind of skipping ahead, actually. But there was DNA. They did run it. And initially, they didn't have anything to go on. So the DNA goes back into evidence and it stays there. The trials go on for Springsteen and Scott, which I thought was kind of funny because Michael Scott is a main character in The Office, and he has a character called Prison Mike.
Yeah.
So this guy was the real Prison Mike. But they basically... they got convicted, like you said. And one thing I want to touch on real quick, when you were talking about the failure after failure for it to pass, like they didn't do it test. I understand that like there is such a thing as false confessions. And I do understand that a regular person isn't probably going to be mentally equipped to handle that type of an interrogation. But it is your responsibility as a citizen of the United States to know your rights. Mm-hmm. And you should be very aware of them, and you should be putting them into practice, especially if you're being accused of a quadruple homicide. And if you don't know your rights and you don't understand what you can and can't do and what you don't have to be put through, right, as a United States citizen, you better be invoking your rights, or you could end up in this situation. So it's also their fault. If you didn't commit this crime, it's not like a petty like drug charge, this is a robbery and a homicide of 4 minors and an arson and like a bunch of other charges. And if you genuinely didn't do it, I'm not saying that they did do it. I'm just saying if I was in that position and I'm being accused of a crime I didn't do, something that serious especially, I would definitely be refusing to speak to them. I just don't... There's a little bit of blame that needs to be put on them as well, because they are adults at this point and they should know their rights. So,
yeah, I agree. I mean, it's their failure for not knowing their rights, but also, I don't want to get into it. I could go all day on this, but it's like school.
I know.
School fucking teaches you what magma is, but they don't teach you why you should. If you're in a custodial situation and you're being asked substantive questions about your involvement in a crime, why you would not want to answer those questions. For some reason, we have civics courses, we have social studies, but we're not actually teaching people how to function in the real world through those things. We'll tell them that the vice president cast the tie-breaking vote in the Senate, but not actually tell them something they need to know, right?
Yeah, no, I hear you, and I do agree with that. And these guys were still kind of young. They were 20. So, I mean, it's not like they're 40-year-olds and they should know better at this point. But just a message to you folks out there. Know your rights. And don't get yourself in a situation where you're confessing to a quadruple homicide that you didn't commit. Because these 2 guys were convicted of the murders and they were sentenced to prison, life sentences. And they stayed in jail for a while. They were not, their convictions were overturned in like 2006, 2007. And it was for procedural errors on the, not the defense, excuse me, the state, the way they conducted some of the some of the trial process was against some constitutional clause, and it was overturned. And I guess the state tried to pursue it again, but they didn't have enough to pursue it again. So that just goes to show this whole thing from start to finish was kind of like muddled up, and it wasn't necessarily law enforcement's fault. There's a lot of people and steps involved in between an arrest and a conviction, right? So, and I have said this, and I will, I'll take it back. Not take it back, but there's an exception to every rule, right? I have said before that if you go to trial and you get convicted of something, you probably did it because you don't get that far unless you're implicit in some way, shape, or form, right? Well, if we're just speaking by the letter of the law and the way that this turned out in the black and white of it, obviously that's not the case here, right? Because there's no real evidence, and that was the problem. There was no real physical evidence. There's just a confession. Really, that's what it boils down to. But by 2007, these two are free. Their conviction was overturned, and the case is still now unsolved because they were incorrect in their who they identified as the suspects, right? So 2009, this DNA thing comes back up. Investigators are put back on the case because it's a cold case at this point, and the DNA profile matches. It gets a hit in CODIS, but the FBI won't release the the information because it was obtained through an anonymous donor, and there are laws that protect people who donate DNA anonymously. One of the other issues with that, though, because I read that and I was like, what? For a homicide investigation? I feel like that should be, a clause in the law or something like that. Well,
it seems like or at least they'd be able to ask for a warrant to release the name and say the probative value outweighs, the privacy concern of the person who donated. And suppose so the court gets a handle or gets the name of the person who donated that DNA and it's not a match. You can seal that record. You can still protect the privacy after the fact. We'll still exploring use the probative value of having that evidence on hand. I think the public interest in solving a quadruple homicide, and I'm very much into the rights of the individual, and I don't like my DNA being in a database, but it was already submitted. The DNA was already there, right? It wasn't like they were going out and trying to issue a warrant to go find some guy and do a buccal swab. They already had it in hand. It seems to me like they could have just had one person open up the envelopes, a double blind, say, is this a match? Yes or no. And then once it's a match, you'd say, well, let's unseal the names.
Right. Well, one of the issues, and that makes perfect sense, and I think that's part. I am
a non-attorney spokesperson. I am very good at the law. These are our suspects, by the way. Top left, Maurice Pierce, Forrest Wellborn, Robert Springsteen, and then Michael Scott, lower right. They were questioned within days of the murders, but then lack of evidence eventually cleared all of them. I guess the only thing that they had was the possession of the one firearm that was supposedly used in the scene, and then the confession. So once those get tossed out, it's almost like, well, there's not enough evidence to keep them, I guess, is eventually how it eventually turned out.
Yeah, and Robert looks like Will Forte. Just want to throw that out there. I just noticed that.
It could, and I don't want to speak out of turn, but it could have been Will Forte. I don't know. It probably wasn't.
It might have been, but we don't know that for sure. One of the issues with the DNA, not just the anonymous donor, but when I dug into it, because I was like, that sounds wrong, right? Well, apparently the DNA, because it was only a partial, the reason why it hit on somebody was because a Y chromosome matched. I'm not a DNA expert, so please, if you are, then let me know how to properly say this, because I don't fully understand how DNA works, but apparently the Y chromosomes and other.
This is from a CBS article about it. C.C. Moore, a DNA expert and a genetic genealogist who was interviewed for an episode of 48 Hours, told the CBS correspondent that the Y STR DNA is sometimes a tool used in criminal cases. She explained it can eliminate almost everyone except the suspect. If the Y STR does not match, then they did not contribute to the DNA. Because where that DNA was found in this case, it's very important. So I guess it's there. It only has a partial sample, and it's missing some important part that helps you match it to a person. So all you can do is, this is almost at this point is like a fingerprint. You can have a suspect take a DNA sample from them and say, well, does it match this partial DNA sample that we have? So, you know, you can't use it to search for people, but you can use it to exclude someone. So the DNA is not, the DNA is almost like a fingerprint, right? You have to have a suspect to fingerprint. You have to have a suspect to take the DNA from, and then you could compare it to what little was left behind, saying yes or no. Is it at least a partial match?
Yeah. And the partial match for this DNA sample for that YST, sorry, I already forgot it, but apparently it also, the odds of it matching, it could have matched thousands of other people. And that was the problem with this particular DNA sample. It wasn't enough genetic material to
it could have matched
if it was someone.
Yeah. Let's say, you know, it was taken from a guy who's, you know, 40 or he's 50% white and he's 25% black and 25% Native American. It could have matched a whole bunch of people who matched that genetic profile. And what does that mean in terms of a conviction? It means reasonable doubt. So the mere fact that it could match thousands of other people means all the defense attorney says, like, well, it might have matched a lot of other people who have this DNA profile. So that's reasonable doubt right there. When you have a DNA match that's 100% exact, the likelihood that it could be another person is usually like 20 quadrillion people, right? Like it couldn't be another person in the history of all human beings who have ever lived, because I don't think quadrillions of people have lived on this earth. Like we're up to like 8 billion right now, to let alone a quadrillion. I don't think we've even reached a single quadrillion since the human race was created. So that's the kind of certainty that you get with an 100% DNA match. A partial, you know, you're able to exclude someone saying, well, they're definitely not this because they don't have these markers.
Right, exactly. And as you said, it's funny, the hypocrisy or irony or ignorance, if you will, of podcasters and other people who weigh in on these things that don't have even just probably basic knowledge of how all this stuff works. They will, in one case, chastise, you know, prosecutors and law enforcement for pursuing someone who isn't like 100% DNA match, right? Because it's not thorough and it's not correct and it's whatever. But like in this case, they're complaining, bitching essentially, because they had a match, but they didn't pursue the leads, right? And it's like, well, how do you want it? You were talking about rights earlier, and it struck up a thought that with the false confession thing, they get mad about stuff like that because the cops are berating poor innocent people, which, by the way, you have the luxury of knowing is innocent because you know the conclusion of the case when you're reading about it for your podcast. But at the same time, they're confused and bewildered that investigators have to let real suspects go because they don't have enough to arrest them on yet. So it's like, how do you want it? Do you want people to have have rights? Or you just want to cherry pick when people can and can't have civil rights based on how you want this investigation to go so you can have something to say on your podcast? It just blows my mind. But anyway, that's just my personal 2 cents on that.
We're angry, and as it's said in previous episodes, only you and I are behaving appropriately in society. Everyone else is suspect and open to criticism, but you and I are good.
Correct. Because we're self-aware, so we can get away with it a little bit more.
We're at least aware of our bullshit. Yes.
So unfortunately, because of all this, this case has a lot of twists and turns, but eventually and inevitably, it's still unsolved. It's still a cold case. There have been statements from law enforcement that they're getting closer and closer with the DNA that they have. But really, honestly, I don't know if that's true. I hope it's true. I know sometimes law enforcement's, they're not straight up lying, but they do kind of fluff things up to make people feel better about it, especially with cases like this. I mean, it's like 30 something years old now, and it was 4 innocent lives that were taken. The Jennifer and Sarah's parents lost 2 daughters, 2 children, and obviously Eliza and Amy's parents suffered immensely as well. And at the end of the day, those are the people that really, really suffer from this. And obviously, Springsteen and Scott, who went to prison for this, and they were wrongfully convicted. But it reaches more than just the actual victims. It spreads to everyone that knows these victims and are involved. And to go that long without an answer is just, I can't imagine the hell that these people have to go through on a daily basis just to get through the day. And like you said, at the end of the day, that's who we should be focusing on, is the victims.
And
it's fun to sit and speculate. And the star of the night?
Yeah.
Who is that?
No, I'm saying at the start of the night, you should still be thinking about the victims.
Yes.
Not just at the end of the day. At the start of the night, too.
I thought you said the star of the night, and I was waiting for you to say something quippy about a random person that has nothing to do with this. And it's related to some inside joke that we have.
Oh, it's hard. Yeah, it's so hard to know when I'm talking about something that only you know, or when anyone else might know it, or when I'm just behaving strangely. I have ruined this podcast through my behavior the past several months.
No. No, you have not. You've made it delightful.
We'll get Deadleg on here or something. We'll figure it out. We'll find some way to save the show. She laughs at the that was such a put down to Josh. Oh, we'll get Josh on here, and she laughs. He used to host the show, so this show on Tuesday night, everybody gets a turn. So we all just go around, and somebody will be hosting it soon. So
this is the rotisserie of true crime shows.
This is a rotisserie chicken on Tuesday nights. If you like what you're getting here on Tuesday nights, enjoy it while it lasts, man. Because who the hell knows, right? I'm just kidding. We'll be here forever.
Whatever.
Due to the law. Kendra, let's we could wrap it up. I mean, I don't want to go on for 3 more hours like certain other shows. Do you have any other final? Do you have other final thoughts on this case before we close it out? Other than just to say, this is a bunch of bullshit and these girls deserve better.
I mean, that goes without saying that obviously these girls deserve justice and their families deserve answers and closure. There was speculation that a serial killer that was in the area was responsible for this, and he did give a deathbed confession for it, but there was really nothing that actually connected him to it. So we'll never know.
In fact, he lied about some of the details. He said that he had mutilated remains, which they weren't mutilated. So That's just some asshole trying to get a little bit of more infamy before he goes out. And I don't doubt that at all. We've talked about cases here before where, inmates will, convicted felons, they'll lie about certain details so they can get out of prison. Oh, I hid the body over there, so just so they can enjoy a day trip. There's plenty of. They have no scruples at all, which is why they wound up in this situation. So I'm not surprised there was another false confession by a more notorious person trying to pad their resume in the Air Force Serial Killer Hall of Fame. Brought to you by Air Force Aim High. I'm not at all surprised that would have happened. Kendra, if someone wants to reach out to you and give you a case on the show, this literally happened yesterday where someone sent me a case and I'm just like, why are you sending it to me? I actually don't host the show. I'm the one that just turns it on. And Kendra is the one that makes the show happen. Kendra is in charge of all programming. How can they reach out to you?
Well, you are carrying the show. Your names that you come up with on here, if you're not watching, you should, because it's quite hilarious and it gives a lot of context to the bullshit that we say. You can find me at truecrime_drama on Instagram. I also have an email address. It's truecrimedrama@gmail.com. Go follow me on Instagram, because I'm on Instagram all the time. That's how you're gonna get in touch with me. I have had people send me some cases too. If I don't respond right away, I'm not ignoring you. I have a very long roster of cases. I have a running master list of cases that I want to cover. But if you find one that you think would be interesting, and I'll look into it, and if it's crazy enough, I'll bump my roster and put it at the top, because I'm all about getting new ideas. I mean, half the battle is finding cases that you want to cover, because researching is quite monotonous when you don't really care about the case, right? So I'm open to suggestion. So go follow me on Instagram.
What I'd like
and
to
email
see
me
is
stories.
If you come across a case that you think Kendra can solve, put in the subject line, solve this case. Former law enforcement officer and investigator of listeners of other podcasts and readers of Wikipedia, Kendra will figure out who solved your loved one's murder. You can go ahead and send that to her at kendra@gmail.com. Folks, if you like this podcast, you can watch us on YouTube, which you probably all right now. Make sure you hit like and subscribe, hit the little notification bells. You can also listen to us on Rumble. If you don't like the censorship military industrial complex, deciding what your brain thinks is entertaining, you might go over there. We have been a little bit throttled on YouTube recently. Some weird stuff's been happening. I'm not allowed to use like Hillary Clinton pizza. Well, now we're demonetized. Damn it, John. I'm not allowed to say or do certain things on YouTube. It's fine. And pass it on to a friend as well. If you're a law enforcement or first responder and you like the fact that we're silly and dark about this stuff, and we have a different perspective, and that we don't like people who criticize the police, because there's enough of that going on out there. Tell them about our show. You'd appreciate it. As for me,
yes, please.
You can find me on Instagram as well, and I have over 100 shows on this platform. So if you don't know how to reach out to me, then you just don't want to do it at this point, which is fine, because I don't have as many followers as Carly's dog Beignet, but I have some. Damn it, and that's enough for me.